There are wounds that do not merely hurt you. They introduce you to a chamber within yourself you did not know existed. Betrayal is one of them. Not the small betrayals of gossip, pettiness, or social vanity, but the kind that breaks the hidden architecture of your world. The trusted voice, the familiar face, the person, habit, or ideal you built your inner safety around. When that structure collapses, the pain feels strangely ancient, as if something older than memory has been touched. The alchemists called this the blackening, the moment when form decays and the soul is forced to face raw substance again. Jung saw the same truth in psychological language. What shatters us often reveals what we were unconsciously serving. So the real question is not only, who betrayed me? It is more dangerous than that. It is, what inside me was ready to be exposed? Because every outer traitor arrives where an inner division already waits in silence. Imagine an old scholar in the port city of Selene, a keeper of manuscripts, metals, and sacred formulas. His name was not remembered for his success, but for the humiliation that remade him. He took in a young assistant, quiet, observant, almost reverent in the way he listened. The scholar taught him everything: how to measure powders by moonlight, how to seal a vessel without cracking the glass, how to pray before beginning any operation of fire. For years, the old man mistook admiration for loyalty. Then, one winter morning, the assistant was gone. So were the notebooks, a pouch of coins, and the letters that proved the scholar's reputation. The city called it theft. But what destroyed him was not the loss of property. It was the revelation beneath it. He had built his identity on being needed, respected, and reflected back to himself through another's devotion. Betrayal did not only reveal the assistant's character, it revealed the secret dependency hidden inside the master. This is the first forbidden lesson of betrayal. The wound is rarely clean. It does not expose only the one who deceived you. It also exposes the bargain you made to remain asleep. Jung would say that when trust collapses, the shadow begins to move. Not only their shadow, but yours. The qualities you refuse to examine. The instincts you silenced. The boundaries you kept postponing because the truth would have cost you comfort. In that sense, betrayal is not simply an attack. It is an unveiling. It shows you where you traded discernment for belonging, intuition for fantasy, solitude for the illusion of safety. This is why the pain feels so total. The psyche is not grieving one event. It is grieving an entire inner arrangement. A false piece is breaking apart. And hidden beneath that collapse is the figure we might call the Inner Judas, the part of you that keeps selling your wholeness for small coins. Approval, numbness, distraction, the need to be chosen, the need to be right. In the old mysteries, the beginning of transformation was never light. It was descent. The black stage of alchemy, Nigredo, begins when the image you trusted starts to rot in your hands. A relationship, a friendship, a role, a future you were certain of. This is why betrayal feels like a spiritual event. It does not simply take something away. It removes the mask that made your life feel coherent. The ego wants a villain because villains are easy. If one person is fully guilty, then you do not have to examine the hidden structure that allowed them into your inner temple. But alchemy is not a courtroom. It is a laboratory of truth. The work begins the moment you stop asking only, how could they do this to me? And begin asking, what was I refusing to see? That question is painful because it breaks the charm of innocence. Yet it is also the first moment of freedom. A false unity must die before a deeper wholeness can be born. There is an old Sufi parable about a man named Farid who hung a lantern outside his house every night. Travelers believed it was an act of mercy. Neighbors praised his devotion. Even Farid himself began to think of the light as proof of his goodness. Then, one evening, a guest arrived, soft-spoken, humble, eager to listen. Farid welcomed him, fed him, and over many weeks told him everything. His prayers, his doubts, the private verses he had never shown another soul. One dawn, the guest disappeared, taking with him Farid's journal and a small box of silver. Farid ran through the streets in rage, calling the man a serpent, a liar, a curse sent by God. But when he returned home exhausted, he found the lantern had burned out. For the first time in years, he stood before his own doorway in darkness. And there, in the wall behind the lamp, he saw a long crack filled with rot and nesting vermin. The theft had not created the decay. It had only revealed what the light had helped him ignore. That is the hidden psychology of betrayal. The betrayer does not always place darkness inside you. More often, they extinguish the outer light that was helping you avoid what was already there. This is why Jung warned that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It returns as fate. Betrayal is one of fate, is sharpest instruments because it tears through the ego's most protected illusion. The belief that if you are good enough, careful enough, loving enough, life will spare you from rupture. But the psyche is not a machine of reward and punishment. It is initiatory. It brings you again and again to the places where your self-deception is strongest. So when the wound opens, the deeper question changes. Not, why was I singled out for pain? But, what in me depended on illusion? Was your loyalty rooted in truth, or in fear of abandonment? Was your kindness real, or was it a strategy to remain necessary? Was your trust openness or denial dressed in beautiful language? At this stage, the inner Judas does not appear as a monster. It appears as a mirror. It points, with terrible precision, to every place where you betrayed yourself before anyone else had the chance. The red flags you explained away. The unease in your body you called anxiety instead of wisdom. The lonely bargain you made in silence. Better to lose myself than lose this person, this role, this illusion. That is why betrayal can feel like an underworld journey. You do not only lose the other, you lose the map you used to understand yourself. In Hermetic language, this is why the experience must be held inside a vessel. The old alchemists called it the vas hermeticum, the sealed container where opposing forces can burn without destroying the whole work. Psychologically, the vessel is conscious containment. You do not rush into revenge, and you do not rush into premature forgiveness. You stay with the fire long enough to hear what your grief, anger, and humiliation are actually trying to teach you. Here we come to an occult truth that most people miss because pain makes the mind literal. Your strongest reaction is rarely guarding only the wound. Very often, it is guarding a hidden treasure buried beneath the wound. The shadow wraps gold in poison, so the ego will avoid touching it. This is why betrayal can trigger obsession, shame, or despair with such overwhelming force. Obsession may be protecting your lost power, the authority you handed away when you made another person the keeper of your emotional climate. Shame may be protecting self-respect long buried beneath years of compromise. Despair may be concealing an unlived life, the life that could not begin while you were still kneeling before the old arrangement. The alchemists did not discard venom. They distilled it. And in the same way, the psyche asks you not to worship your pain, but to decode it. What exactly is this suffering trying to return to you? What faculty? What instinct? What forgotten strength has been sealed inside the poison? This is where the work becomes more dangerous, because now you enter the corridor of projection. At first, the betrayer appears as pure darkness. The mind paints them in one absolute color, so you do not have to face the complexity of your own participation. But if you remain inside the vessel long enough, something unsettling begins to emerge. The person who hurt you may be carrying energies you were never allowed to own. Not their cruelty, not their deception. Those belong to them. But the archetypal force they activate in you may reveal what you exiled from yourself. Perhaps they embody a selfishness you were taught to fear, the ability to choose yourself without apology. Perhaps they embody a strategic intelligence you buried beneath politeness. Perhaps they embody the courage to leave what no longer fits. This is why betrayal can be catalytic. It does not only wound, it forces a recovery of disowned life. The figure outside you becomes the dark messenger of something within you that wants to return from exile. The next danger is projection. At first, the betrayer appears to carry all the darkness. The mind paints them in a single color because that is simpler than facing the complexity of your own participation. Jung understood this well. The ego prefers moral clarity when the soul is demanding inner work. But if you remain with the image long enough, something more unsettling appears. The other person is not only a villain in your story. They are also carrying disowned energies that belong, in altered form, to you. Not their actions, those remain theirs. But the archetypal force they awaken in you may reveal your own exiled capacities. Perhaps they embody the selfishness you were never allowed to claim as healthy self-protection. Perhaps they embody strategic intelligence you condemned because you wanted to remain innocent. Perhaps they embody the forbidden ability to leave what no longer nourishes you. This is why betrayal is catalytic. It does not merely injure. It forces a retrieval. It returns you to powers you abandoned in order to remain acceptable. In alchemy, after the blackening comes separation, the difficult art of distinguishing one element from another. This is where healing becomes precise. You begin to divide fact from fantasy, event from interpretation, their betrayal from your lesson. Write it as if you were an alchemist standing over a smoking vessel. What actually happened? What promises were spoken? And which ones were only imagined? What did you sense early that you refused to honor because it threatened the story you wanted to live inside? This stage is painful because it breaks enchantment. The psyche can no longer hide behind grand emotion. It must enter discernment. And discernment is not dramatic. It is quiet, exact, almost surgical. You stop feeding the myth that the entire tragedy came from outside you, and you stop feeding the myth that everything was your fault. Both are evasions. The work is to separate without collapsing into blame. Only then can the hidden pattern emerge, and only then can consciousness take back the authority that projection surrendered. There is an old tale from late Alexandria about a philosopher named Marcellus who wore a bronze ring engraved with a star. He told his students it helped him speak truth without fear. Over time, the ring became part of his presence, almost a relic. Crowds gathered as much for the symbol as for the wisdom. Then one evening, just before a public lecture, he reached for his hand and found the ring gone. Panic rose instantly. His thoughts scattered. His voice failed him. He left in disgrace, convinced he had been spiritually ruined. Days later, he learned that the ring had been taken by his most loyal student, not out of hatred, but out of desperation. You trust the symbol more than the source, the student said. And that was the real wound. Betrayal had removed his charm against uncertainty. This is often what the psyche does. It tears away the object, the role, the relationship, or the habit you used to feel secure, so you can discover whether your center was ever truly yours. This is where betrayal becomes practical rather than poetic. Because every betrayal leaves behind a residue, a binding of attention. You replay the scenes, rehearse the arguments, check for signs, scroll through traces, return again and again to the same psychic altar. The occultists would have called this enchantment, not because it is mystical in a theatrical sense, but because your life force has become trapped in a single image. Jung used another language. Libido, psychic energy, invested in an object that now rules you from the inside. The next operation, then, is withdrawal, not denial, not suppression. Withdrawal of misplaced devotion. You name the hook with ruthless honesty. Is it rage? Is it longing? Is it humiliation? Is it the fantasy that one final answer will restore your innocence? Then you ask the harder question. What do I gain by remaining bound? Identity as victim, perhaps. Avoidance of emptiness. Delay of grief. Once you see the payoff, the spell weakens, and the energy can finally be returned to the work of becoming. After this comes albedo, the whitening. Not optimism, not forced peace. Albedo is what appears after decay has done its work and the water begins to clear. In psychological terms, it often arrives as a cold, unromantic realization. I was loyal to an image, not to reality. I was attached to potential, not to truth. I mistook emotional intensity for intimacy. I confused familiarity with destiny. This is where the inner Judas reveals its deeper purpose. It is not only the part of you that betrays. It is also the part that refuses to let self-deception remain sacred. But this phase asks for something humiliating. Participation must be acknowledged, not to drown in self-blame, but to recover agency. Where did you barter discernment for comfort? Where did you silence your body's warnings to protect a narrative? Where did you fear solitude more than truth? The whitening begins when you stop begging for a different past and start building a different inner structure. Then comes the union of opposites, what the alchemists called coniontio, the sacred joining after division. Betrayal splits the psyche at first. One part of you becomes hard, suspicious, watchful. Another part still longs for softness, trust, and devotion. One side wants to close the gates forever. The other still aches to believe. If you choose only one, you become incomplete. Either you turn naive again and repeat the pattern, or you calcify into bitterness and call it wisdom. The deeper work is harder. You learn tenderness with boundaries, compassion without self-erasure, openness without blindness. Jung would have called this the birth of a third position, the transcendent function, where the psyche no longer swings between innocence and cynicism, but holds both tensions until a new form appears. And in that new form, something remarkable happens. The betrayer stops being the center of your story. They shrink back into ordinary human size, no longer an idol, no longer a god of your wound, only one figure in your initiation. Finally, we arrive at rubedo, the reddening, the stage where insight must become embodied life. Because a revelation that does not alter your habits becomes only decoration for the ego. The inner Judas rarely returns wearing a dramatic face. More often, it appears as a small bargain. One more message to the person who already showed you who they are. One more compromise against your own instinct. One more distraction to avoid the silence where truth waits. 30 coins, again and again, paid in tiny daily transactions. So the final work is simple, severe, and holy. Notice the temptation the moment it appears. Name it without poetry. Delay it. Redirect the energy into form. Movement, prayer, writing, work, stillness, disciplined action. This is how betrayal becomes initiation rather than identity. Its true lesson is not that you are cursed, unlovable, or destined for pain. It is that every fracture reveals where you were already divided. And when that division is healed, you do not become cold. You become whole, sovereign, and far harder to sell.